So actually, there's a question in the slides and the title of my talk, and obviously the answer is yes. So I wouldn't be doing this presentation otherwise. If the answer was no, we would just go and be done with it. But actually, it's possible to use statically typed language in Gradle, obviously. And who am I? I work with a really large code base that it's around 4 million lines of Scala code, and we use Gradle for it. And that Gradle is in Groovy. So I've seen many horrors. I've seen things I didn't want to see. And I'd rather write it in a statically typed language, in Kotlin, because it's possible now. So I want to go today through how we can actually do that, how it's different, and hopefully show you that it's actually working now. So, and that it has a proper tooling support. We'll try some live coding, but I have prepared for the eventuality that it will not work. And we'll try to see how it works with IntelliJ and stuff like that. Okay. But first, some news. So actually, this talk is very well timed. Gradle 5.0 with Kotlin DSL 1.0 is just released. So hooray! Yeah. So it's actually production ready. So everybody, we can use it in business related projects because we can tell people, hey, it's actually ready. It's good. Might not work perfectly, I guess, but they are pretty confident with that. So, okay. Some background. That's the pitch on the Gradle site. So you can read it. It just basically says we can do everything for everyone. So it's kind of, you know, an opposite of the previous talk. So Gradle can do everything and gives you all the extensions you want, and is probably one of the most classical tools you can imagine. So you get scripts, you get a lot of problems getting it all together, and you can write a lot, you can use a lot of plugins, you can complicate it. So yeah, so that's Gradle. There's a lot of things it can do. I just listed whatever I thought, because basically whatever you think of, you probably can list it there. You can declare some properties to be used with version, names, create some tasks, declare dependencies, work with multiple modules. I think we have like 400 in our project, 400 modules. So that's quite a lot. It builds your code, adds new functionality. So yeah, if John were here, he would probably smirk at it and say that's way a bit too much maybe. But yeah, it's actually now pretty easy to start doing using Gradle in IntelliJ, for example. I would prefer using IntelliJ because that Kotlin support is there. So yeah, you just downloaded the newest version of IntelliJ. You can create. I will try to show how you can quickly create. I can do it now actually. So to create it, you basically just do the project and you click on the Gradle. You can click, hey, Kotlin DSL. You can say like I want to use Kotlin in this, and yeah, basically you get to fill some other properties, not really important. Yeah, so you can use some other Gradle. I will use the 5.0 because I think the one packaged with IntelliJ is 4.6 now. But I would use 5.0, but it should be easy to just download the binary. So that getting that is an additional step. Yeah, so that's easy. And just to set the historical part, I have a Gradle project set up, how it looks. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's really not important. It doesn't look good. You can just do anything like in dynamic languages. No pointers, there are plenty. Everything is messy. I don't want to spend too much time on it, so
that's okay because null is an object.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want null.
But you still would get null pointer exception.
Yeah. But yeah. So that's the usual one. And why would I use Kotlin? Maybe it doesn't need an explanation, but I would love to give one. So no pointer exception, that's the last one, but I think that's one of the more important ones because Gradle is crazy when you like run the configuration, everything's configured, project start compile, and then bam, at some point there's a null pointer exception. You have to go back and do everything again. So that's not fun. You can use the same language for writing Kotlin. So you can be doing the build tool in Kotlin and the projects in Kotlin. So it's just like you don't have to switch context and everything is like all together. Sorry?
Like consistency.
Yeah, consistency. Perfect. No need for dynamic language. Why would we need dynamic languages? It's just the same thing. You write everything and you only know at some distant point in the future that something's broke. It's maybe good for some small scripts, but the bigger a project gets, you just don't want that. And it's a modern language with a lot of useful new features, which I'm still learning some of them, so it's really nice to get to that. So let's see how it looks in build.gradle. So if you went through all that new projects stuff, then you would get something like that. Let me see if we can actually. So it's actually looks much nicer. I don't remember this. Does anybody can see, or we need to make it larger? Yeah. So. Yeah. What's the shortcut for that? That would be useful. Ah, full screen presentation. Yeah. I don't know if it's much more useful. It's more readable, I think. Yeah. So. It's much nicer, the coloring, right? The editor looks nicer. I'll go through some of the stuff here so that we don't actually have to look at it now, but you cannot just say, like in all of the other like Gradle files would just say, let's say project dot, I don't know, add something, and yeah, that wouldn't be. And here you already know that, hey, that's the wrong name. So that's I know it's from static type languages, but I mean that's a huge improvement. In Groovy, you would just like, is the name correct? I think so. Sometimes you get some nice like IntelliJ is quite smart sometimes in Groovy, but sometimes can go totally broken. So. And here you already know that something's wrong. Yeah, that's the basically one. Let's start looking at some of the features. So one of the features I found that is very useful, unless it, yeah, okay, is that we already have all the like known plugins. So if you start with, let's say we got the application plugin. It's actually in Groovy that would be a string. Here you know that already exists, and all the known plugins are here. If you just add some unknown plugin, it will show you that it's not actually a plugin. So hey, that's cool. Right, what can we do with that plugin? Let's see. We can go and run it, right? Oh no, we didn't configure the main class. Okay, cool. So we can yeah, that disappeared again. We can configure the main class, but hey, let's see what IntelliJ can do here. Okay, import changes, get everything up and running. And where do I put that main? Let's see if application has something. Oh yeah, actually, that's here. Do we have the main class here? Yeah, main class. That's cool. And I have a main Kotlin, so that should go well. And just run it. Yeah, hello Kotlin. That's cool. Yeah. So I think that's an important improvement here. Some other stuff. Repositories. All of the repositories are defined. Like you can have a nice, really nice way to get what is going on, what we can have, and there's pretty nice way of like the auto-completion is pretty nice. Dependencies, I think it's pretty cool that you have, for every Kotlin dependency, you just can have the keyword Kotlin, and we'll use the Kotlin version that is already there, and the standard library here, for example, the standard library from that. I think we can actually try another one. So I think there's a test one, isn't it? You can just call it test, right? Let's see if that works. And yeah, it still works. It imported that. So it already imported the Kotlin library with the version that is configured in the file. So this is I think the newest one, 1.3.10. So yeah, that's cool. Every other thing is configured similar to Groovy, but I think it still looks much nicer and it's easier to work with. Alright, so that's dependencies. So obviously we have the different scope. We have the compile scope, and there's I think the new implementation scope. I think, yeah, that's nicely showed here. The auto completion is pretty nice and it's pretty quick. So yeah, something more interesting. So everything in Gradle is basically tasks and projects. Projects are show like the artifact, some artifact of the build. Like it can be a module to build, a library to build, and we get tasks which actually show what needs to be executed. They execute this stuff, and they do every kind of work in Gradle. So what we want with those tasks, we want to probably use the usual ones and create maybe some nicer ones. So let me, some custom ones. Let me show how exactly you can create them. But here I will cheat because I don't want to write that again. And yeah, I think that was on 2. Let me check. Yeah, so, oh no, that's on 3. I had a lot of versions. Yeah. So actually you need to re-import here because we changed the Gradle file, but it's pretty quick. And I can go through some examples here. So like the easiest way to create a task would be like here, you just write task. It's very similar to Gradle, but new one. It has some nice quirks, I think, that you get this, you know exactly what this is everywhere. So you can do the do last, similar as in normal Gradle. And you can do whatever you want. That's the simplest task here. You can I can show you how the calculate works. So we can do that, and that just calculates stuff. And I also added dependency on run. So every time you run the calculate, it will also run the application that is there. And so it's actually a lot of that is easy to access from here. You can see master and after has properties. It's pretty nice. I think it's much better in Groovy Gradle, but IntelliJ, the newest version, also has like nice support for Groovy, but I still you can cheat your way through a lot of that and write some random stuff. You don't want that, but you will probably do that by mistake. And we use Kotlin, it's much nicer to see that it will not happen. You have this nice new way of specifying tasks, so you can add the type here, and that's all the known tasks. Groovy one, for example, copy. You can specify this way, and so I think it's much nicer way than the Groovy way. I actually have like a lot of this stuff. If you go through the newest examples in the documentation, you have both versions here. So not all of it is totally different from each other, but it's nice that they treat Kotlin right now as an equal to Groovy. At least it feels that way. Groovy is first here, but doesn't mean it's lesser. And everything in the documentation actually has different versions, so it's very useful. I recommend that. I went through some of it to figure out the differences, and it's really nice. You can use delegates, so you can create a copy by using delegates. I don't know, have you ever done that, but it's basically another way to specify the task. And yeah, I don't know if that's that important. I prefer the easier way to configure, so this is a bit easier here than the delegates, but it might be useful to, so that's the features I was talking about, the Kotlin features that you can use. You can also specify your own tasks, and this is, I think, pretty neat, because here you actually have values, so you can, like, you don't have to use finals, and it's a nice cozy custom task, and you can then easily create it just like the copy one. So if you can specify a lot of like custom tasks similar to the copy ones, and just have a simple way to create like instances of those tasks later on. I can show you how that ecoDAC works. Yeah, so it just works. It's not very complicated stuff, but I think it's a nice way to create those tasks. Yeah, so that's it with the task. I don't think we need to work on it too much. Yeah. Another important thing that is connected to the task is like, how does actual Gradle work? So there's 3 phases, and each of those phases goes after each other. They're not intertwined. So you have the initialization phase, which gathers all the projects, figures out what is the master project, and gets all the project objects created that are later used in the next phase. And actually, an interesting thing about initialization, you can run Gradle not only from your main project, but from like sub-projects, and it still will know which is the main project because of the settings.gradle file. And additionally, it looks like for the closest surroundings of the current project to see if there's maybe a master somewhere. So you can actually have different ways. It doesn't need to be in a sub-project. You can have a sibling. It also looks for siblings, I think. You can have, if you have a master, there's different ways to that Gradle looks for the master project and how it creates all the tree, because Gradle, those projects create a tree. It's not a graph, it's a tree. It's also a graph because tree, but not important. Then the next phase is configuration, where all the build scripts are evaluated, so everything happens later on. And last is the execution, which I'm tempted to say magic happens, but that's no magic. It's just hard Gradle work. And every task that is determined to run is later run. So in that phase, we figure out what should be run, and then we run it. And there's a lot of hooks for that. So because sometimes, for example, you want to do something only after all the build scripts were evaluated, you got the after evaluate hook, which enables you to modify something after everything else is configured. So maybe you need some other plugin properties that are defined in a sub-project, something like that. Then you can use after evaluate. You have when task added, so which is quite explicit. So there's plenty of those that you can use, and I think I have a couple of those somewhere. Let me see what was the next step. Number 4. Slash. And let's see. I think that was here. Yeah. So let me see. Yeah. For example, after evaluate, we can see like an example here that. If we go through that, this is we get this print line in the evaluate, and then we have within the evaluation phase, so we can see how it runs. So we can run basically anything here. We can write the duck, and you can see that it actually is. The first one is the print line that was outside of the after evaluate block, and then we get the one inside. So you can see it actually works. And we can also check the when task added, which I had here. So you can see that. And this should print every task name, so that can be useful. You can basically you have ways to print. So I think if you just print tasks in Gradle, we can actually check that. You will get all the names of the tasks if you write it correctly. Yeah, you get everything here. But you can also write Gradle now, and that will also output all the tasks that were added by us. So yeah, those print lines are not from the task. That's from the previous exercise, you could say. But yeah, so a lot of that stuff works and is pretty neatly shown in Kotlin. So we can have graph, I think. Nope. It's not that fast always. Yep. Where is it from? No. So that's, oh yeah. So it's not perfect, you can see. And you have, I think, graph or task. Rough. No, never mind. I don't remember that. So yeah, documentation is still useful at all times. But yeah, we can use that knowledge of the life cycle to get some hacks going on, or maybe not hacks, but sometimes it's necessary actually to use the after evaluate. I had that situation many times, and the knowledge of how Gradle works and how the lifecycle actually works is pretty important to work with it. So
there was no after evaluate, but
yeah.
so many occasions you want to use that.
Yeah.
Because after evaluate can be added by anything, and there is an order after evaluate, so you cannot after evaluate and there is some other stuff after evaluate, and you are scratching your head like what?
So that's the problem that Kotlin doesn't solve. That's Gradle being too complicated. complicated. That's what I guess Fury solves by not providing a lot of the functionalities. But you know, if you have pretty good developers who don't do crazy stuff, then I think Gradle is still pretty useful, and especially that you can import all of the Kotlin goodness into it. Yeah, so that's the lifecycle. Another thing is the multi-project builds. I already talked that in the first phase, Gradle determines what are the projects. So that will only be needed if we have like more than one project. Otherwise, just checks like, hey, this one project is okay, and it's the main project, and there's nothing else. But to configure like multi-project builds, you need the settings Gradle file. You can also have that in Kotlin. It's not much different than the Gradle one because it basically just you have to add parentheses, and that's it here at least. And I think Gradle doesn't need the equal there. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but I have the next version here. I need to stash it, but yeah, we can check like the next one is we need to apply dependencies, import changes, and I think we need to quit the presentation mode, which is not obvious. Which is yeah. So now we need to check that actually project thing is happening. So the other thing is that I actually just checked out a branch that has much different project structure. I told IntelliJ, hey, can you refresh that? And everything is here. So we've got those alpha, beta projects, and everything seems to be working fine here. And there was no issue whatsoever. And we can check that we still can do some Gradle commands, for example, run. I think that should work. Yeah, so we got hello from alpha, hello from beta, and that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is something different that I will talk about. So another thing that I will talk about in a minute. Yeah. So you've got the settings Gradle, and that's pretty simple. I don't know if I need to enlarge it, but it's exactly as I said, and it has some nice way that the IntelliJ like shows it. I think the project paths, and I think it's much better looking than Groovy, and it's easier to read. But yeah, so I configured that here. Here's just project name, nothing really important, but so basically that's it, I think. Yeah, we got everything configured here. I don't know if you, I don't want to go from too many details, but in order not to specify stuff in here, you can do the all projects, which will basically give you the possibility to apply anything to every project that there is, or you can have sub-projects. Yeah, that will do the same thing to all the sub-projects. So that's a pretty common thing to know. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the intricacies of Gradle, but I don't want to bore you with that, and that's not that much different here than in Groovy Gradle. Will be quite quick, I think, today. The last thing I want to talk about is plugins. So the thing that John doesn't want, and there are two ways of creating plugins. You can have just scripts, which you can apply, and that will apply anything in that script, and that's a script plugin. or you can have binary plugins that you can compile, publish, or there's another way which I found recently and it's pretty fun way of declaring plugins. But yeah, let's see how you can do the. Here you can see that that's actually the script plugin. So Groovy didn't show me this from, and I think it's pretty neat that you can actually do apply and from, and you can see that we don't want that no, and it's pretty neatly shown, and you cannot like do some weird stuff, but I already showed that. I did show that, and it will show us that something's wrong. So a lot of the Groovy stuff. So basically, we're statically typed. We can use Kotlin. It's normal Kotlin. Everything looks fine. And if you look into the side of that plugin, you can see it just adds two extra properties. That's the different way we specify extra project properties by using the extra keyword and its actual map, and not like in Groovy, because in Groovy you could do something like that, and you never knew if that was a function or that was a property. And this way here is much more explicit, and it doesn't break anything, so that's very useful. And
can you import Groovy scripts inside Kotlin 1?
that is interesting. I don't think so, but we can actually quickly do that, right?
I think if you write the NASPR's code, you can.
If you are, say, let's see, token 2, save, and let's see if we can apply from Gradle. Let's see if, I'm not sure actually. Let's see. Let's see. I guess. Yeah, X. So actually, it is possible. That would be interesting. Yeah. And we have everything here right. I think so. Let's see. Yeah, actually you can. Yeah. It's always nice to do in live coding to figure out stuff like that. Yeah. That's some simple live coding. I'm not doing anything crazy. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's stick with code. Maybe when you're migrating like slowly, then maybe, but let's. Yeah.
No, it's a good idea, because some Tomasz script, which is hard to understand in and right now in Kotlin, put in the separate file, like script file, you have everything there, and you can use directly from your Gradle build, which you don't want to modify yet.
You can even import somebody else's script with the help of Fury.
Yeah, that seems rather crazy. I don't think John would be super happy about that, using like Fury to build Gradle and manage dependencies in between Gradle scripts. Yeah, but yeah, you can do a lot with that, and you can use the Gradle ones. I'm not sure about everything how it will work, but I think it should be pretty interchangeable. You cannot write in the same file, but I think this is not like truly Kotlin. It is Kotlin script. It has all the features and enables you to import everything, but I think they probably have something underneath there, because otherwise you wouldn't get the project, for example, because where would you get it from? You don't import it, you don't get it anywhere. So I think there's something underneath that actually makes it work all together, and that it's the same thing that works for Gradle. So they just translate it probably to the same thing. I'm not sure about it, but it isn't like proper Kotlin actually. Yeah. And last thing about the plugins I want to show is how you can actually specify plugins. So another way to specify, we were talking about binary plugins, right? And binary plugins are basically classes. I have a plugin here. You can see let's do the presentation mode. I need to, there's no shortcut. That's, well, I don't remember how to do that. Yeah, so, but it's a Git plugin. It extends like the plugin. I think that's an interface. And it just runs, we get this run command, which just runs some bash or some command line. And what it actually does, it creates a task status, which runs Git status. So basically we pack Git into Gradle, so we can do a lot of stuff. I was thinking of doing a plugin that would actually do the thing I was doing with checking out 1, 2, 3, 4 and just stepping over. And that's very useful for different it wants to import changes. You can do that to make it to do it automatically, but yeah, because otherwise it might get annoying. But I was saying that I was thinking of doing like this. I think it's Scala workshop. It's called Kotlin. It has like a lot of different versions of the code, so that if you're slower than everybody else, you can quickly just go a step further and see what's the actual how you should write the code. So if you have problems, so that's a very useful command, and you can easily do that in Gradle, and you can pack it with Gradle and to use Git. Basically, I think that's the easiest way to do it. But I thought it would be crazy to do that for now. So yeah, but the way normally to specify plugins, you need to have it in a different project, and you have to publish it. But this is a really neat way of doing it inside the same project, because you can do that by using the build src, and build src is just another Kotlin project which has Kotlin like script build definition, and you can use that to build the plugin, and then you can easily you can see that I named the plugin here. It's called Git plugin. It is implementation class. There's this nice DSL for that, and that's more of a Gradle thing, not just Kotlin thing. And you can actually, if you look here, I did apply it. So if we go Gradle status instead of Git status, we get the same. So we get all the status we wanted. So that's a neat way to make easy plugins for like that. You have everything here, which is fully functional Kotlin code. It's not like the Kotlin script, and there's no surprises here. And you can easily get that in the project you're working on, create more plugins, and you don't have to worry about publishing them and making sure it is available somewhere. You can easily do that here, I think, and that's pretty neat, I think. And everything you've seen here is done in Kotlin, so except the new script that we wrote a second ago, but we didn't need to go outside Kotlin. So I think it's pretty amazing that we get the statically typed build tool now, that we can that's highly configurable and still not crazy complicated like the SBT, for example, which apparently is Scala code, but not really. It is Scala code, but not really. So in case of Gradle, it is a statically typed language that is actually has the same features of the language, except Gradle packs it with some project tasks, some additional stuff, but it's still the same language. Okay. Why did that go away? Did that start? Yeah. So that's basically it. I went faster than John, so because I don't want to keep you guys any longer here. You can reach me on Twitter, I guess, or email. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
I can see our great veteran, as you said at the beginning. How much problems will gradually replacing the Ruby code to the Kotlin code will solve? How much problems would it solve to migrate from the Ruby to the Kotlin?
I don't think it would be that complicated, because especially you've seen a lot of the similarities. There's a lot of similarities. You could probably do an automatic, for a lot of the code, you could have an automatic tool that just replaces, adds parentheses, and then it will be easily checked. If you run that tool on the one script, you see that there's something red, then you quickly realize that maybe something was wrong in your Gradle script after all, and you can fix that. So you can actually have an easy tool, or you can replace it by hand. As we've seen, you can have parts still written in Groovy, parts still written in Kotlin, so you can make like little efforts all the time. So you can convince people, hey, let's change this script file one by one. Each day, a new script file will become Kotlin. So I'm thinking it's pretty easy, especially that everything you've seen here is based, there's a way to, let me start again. On Gradle documentation, everything is specified two ways, Groovy way and Kotlin way. So it's always easy to see how to do that, something that you've already done in Groovy, how to do that in Kotlin. And I think that they did a pretty amazing job with that.
Sorry, I don't know, because I understood the question in a different way.
So let me reply, because I also understand in a different way.
Sorry.
Mira quite recently has to actually learn Ruby the hard way and try to apply to Gradle. And every time that he was actually running into stuff like there was wrong camel case or something, the stuff that we are used to, like statically typed languages, are like obvious, so the code will not compile. After an hour build in the end step, when he really want to see his problem, there was like, there is no such method. And he was like, oh! So maybe in the end, like when you look like from the outside, okay, so that's dynamically typed languages, when you write them, test them, they are work, there is no difference. But it cuts, I think, in half the time to implement stuff, and removes so much anger out of you that, you know, for that it's worth using statically typed language.
So if you have a working Gradle script that you don't have to change, or if your Gradle script is really simple, then the transition is probably not worth the effort. But if your build script is as complicated as your project, then by all means static typing would help you.
And in the timeline of the project, it usually gets more complicated.
Yeah, I agree. It's better to start with the Kotlin,
Yeah.
even if it's easy project, because in the future, when you will have more modification, it will be easier for you to save time.
And Ruby is simple as a language, but it got its own stuff going on.
It's
And
small
Gradle-
surprises that you don't want.
Yes, and Gradle itself, like let the side of languages like program, it's super complicated. When you scratch like the fabricate in the beginning is like the start is really simple, like task, okay, right, it works. When you add 2 or 3 more tasks or 2 plugins adding tasks and try to find out which task should be added where, it's a nightmare. Everybody is complaining about SBT, but SBT is way easier than Gradle, if you're doing some advanced stuff.
I don't believe that, but yeah.
Because I know.
Hey, any other questions?
Do you know if there is any difference in the Groovy type that
does the language have any influence on the build time of Gradle?
I think it should be, especially I know that they had to rewrite some of their code from Groovy to Java, so that it's accessible from both Kotlin and Groovy. So that itself made like Gradle faster. And and from what I remember, I don't know how it is now. It used to be 9 times longer to compile Groovy than Java. So it must be faster with Kotlin, especially that Kotlin has really nice compile times.
And also, like if you're doing like hard stuff in Kotlin itself, then code compiled from Kotlin is faster than from Groovy because it's statically-typed, and generally if you're doing like even in the Gradle documentation before they like rewrite most of the code, they were saying if you're doing some stuff that is like quite time consuming, there's a lot of stuff, write them in Java, not in Kotlin, because they will be like really slow.
A lot of the plugins had to be written in Java. So now you can write them in Kotlin, which will be almost as fast as Java, or maybe, I don't know how the times compare, but I think for sure that should be faster than Groovy.
Well, if it compiles to the same kind of bytecode and doesn't have to resolve types in runtime, it must be faster.
So, any other questions?
Thank you, Tomasz.
Okay.
I forgot about John, but I will pass it to him. Tomasz, get your t-shirt.
Thank you.
He was lying in our office for a while, and Tomasz always asking me, can I get 1 second? No, we have to make it.
Yeah.
And now he did it, so, okay?